Marjorie. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang gunuttarang upajjayang namassami. Buddhasalokadammehi chittang yassana kampati asokan virajang khemang mangalamuttamanti. Well, thank you for that warm welcome, Marjorie, and it's wonderful to be with you all again at the TBC. And before I forget, a very, very happy Thanksgiving to everyone. So it's a holiday, it's a special occasion, it's a time of reflection, a time of gratitude, and a time of getting together. So I thought um, it would be appropriate to kind of talk about, or rather elaborate on a conversation that I had with Lumpur Viradammo a couple of days ago. We have these wonderful, wonderful conversations, and the last one was about how awareness combines the intellect and emotion. Right? Um, and so I thought, today being Thanksgiving and all that, we'll talk about the not just the intellectual parts of our practice, but also the emotive parts of the practice. And you know, as we are kind of aware, it's not just awareness, but every experience that we have and life itself is comprised of these two facets, right? A facet of intellect and a facet of emotion. Now, this is what Lumpur Sumedho says when he uses the phrase, it's like this and it all belongs. The it's like this is a reflection. It has a quality of reflectiveness. It has a quality of curiosity, and it all belongs is very, very emotive. It has a feeling of acceptance, has a feeling of non-judgment. So very bright, positive, uplifting kind of emotions. Right? And another wonderful saying, which is on those similar lines, is when Sargadatta Maharaj says, um, love tells me I'm everything, wisdom tells me I'm nothing. And in between the two flows the river of my life. I'm paraphrasing here, but something like that, right? So all the great masters kind of always talk about these two aspects of intellect and emotion. And sometimes, depending on circumstances, depending on conditioning, depending on personality, some people, depending on events, people kind of tend to swing one way or the other. But the brilliance of the Buddha's teachings is lies in his emphasis that for the spiritual life to flourish, the intellect, the intellectual aspects, as well as the emotional aspects of our pursuit, must be evenly balanced. So we need reflection, we need curiosity, we need an intellectual understanding, but at the same time, it needs to be balanced with emotive aspects, aspects of uplift, aspects of well being, aspects of generosity, of virtue, of love, right? And when these two are evenly balanced, that's what really makes the spiritual life smooth, even, balanced, and joyful and pleasant. Right? So then, when we look at our practice, the intellectual part of the practice is obviously reflection, discursive thought, and this kind of focused, disciplined reflection, focused, disciplined discursive thought that has certain boundaries that touch on conscious themes or themes that are made conscious leads to understanding and wisdom. The emotive parts of the practice, the, the feelings of the heart that are generated by, say, the Brahma Viharas, feelings of the heart that are generated by goodness, skillful living, wholesome living, by the precepts, by sila. All of these lead to bright, happy states of mind, and these result in collectedness and peace. And they're not separate, really. They indeed feed into one another, and each props the other up. But it's good to take a moment and see if we tend to marginalize or undervalue one aspect due to an overemphasis on the other. And if we tend to do that, then we are putting ourselves at a bit of a disadvantage. So, this kind of reflection, discursive thought, um, can somehow get overemphasized. And so when we become too intellectual in our practice, right, then our practice loses a sense of malleability, a sense of flexibility, a sense of creativity, a sense of freshness. And we can see that. So when does this happen? Typically, it's an overemphasis of technique. It's an overemphasis of analysis. It's an overemphasizing judgmental voice that keeps constantly chiming in whenever we try and meditate. And things like, this is my practice. This is how I have to do the technique. And if I don't do the technique in this way, I'm not doing things right. That leads to a certain staleness, that leads to a certain um, kind of stagnation of the practice. It can make the practice emotionally unsatisfactory. And as a result, it leads to doubt. It leads to um, a sense of dis-ease, a lack of confidence. We become indecisive, we become doubtful, and then we start proliferating endlessly. So while an intellectual bent of mind is very useful for understanding and for cultivation of wisdom, if that gets overemphasized, it can very easily turn into doubt. It can very easily turn into indecisiveness. Are we doing this right? Oh my God, am I watching the breath properly? Am I observing the sensations properly? It leads to a lot of judgment. And then we start proliferating. endlessly. Similarly, while these uplifting positive emotions lead to calmness, lead to peace, but if we overemphasize these emotive aspects alone, it can very easily turn into mindsets of fundamentalism, superstition, also being deluded, being unhinged from reality, going into kind of spiritual bypass modes. And we see that happening, right, a lot in monasteries. People would come and they want to do certain kinds of very deep practices, and they get so involved in that they lose their reflective ability, and they end up hearing voices. They end up having some kind of a psychotic break. So, both of these, the intellectual aspect as well as the emotive aspect, has not only has very certain definite pros, but then if they become overemphasized, they have their cons as well. They can very easily become detrimental, very quickly become detrimental. And that's why the Buddha always emphasized that these two must go hand in hand. It is the quality of reflection, the quality of curiosity, coupled with an emotive sense of well being, an emotive sense of happiness, an emotive sense of joy. And, it reminds me a lot of what Lumpo Pasano used to say, says quite frequently, is that, the idea that I will get samadhi and then I'll be happy is a myth. Because unless we are happy, we can't get samadhi. So a useful way to kind of look at this partnership between intellect and emotion in the spiritual path is that intellect has to be softened by positive emotions. And when intellect is softened by positive emotion, it gives rise to wisdom, panya. When positive emotions, on the other hand, say the Brahma Viharas, Saddha, Chaga, all of these, remembering goodness, remembering virtue, all of these wonderful, positive, uplifting emotions, when they are balanced by the intellect, it gives rise to Saddha, and gives rise to a wise devotion, a devotion that is devoid of fundamentalism, a devotion that's devoid of superstitious belief, devoid of fear. So then, when we look at this idea of intellect, right? Um, some of these Buddhist terms that, or Pali terms that come to our minds are sammaditi, right view, yoniso manasikara, wise comprehension, sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension. All of these aspects are kind of intellectual, because it draws on the faculty of intellect. And then the positive emotive sides, Brahma Viharas, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha, Chaga, Saddha, all these are the positive emotions. So if you were to look at it uh, in the form of an analogy, the intellect is our GPS. And the positive emotions are the fuel that actually drive this vehicle. So if you have the GPS, we have a sense of direction, we know where to go, and we have the faith, we have the commitment, then those become the fuel to take us where we need to go. Reflective faculty of the mind lays out the options, but it is faith that actually clarifies and simplifies the path. Because very often what happens is if we intellectualize too much, if we analyze everything too much, is this right? Is that right? Is this the particular way to focus on sensations? Is this the particular way to focus on the breath? Then what happens is that we get confused. We get lost, right? But if we say, hold on, yeah, I trust I'm doing this right. Just take a moment, take a breath. Immediately, a sense of clarity, a sense of simplicity arises on the path. So, this kind of complex nature of intellect is tamped down by this grounding, collected faculty that is engendered by positive emotions. Okay. So, a question: do we tend to emphasize the intellectual at the cost of the emotive? Or do we tend to emphasize the emotive at the cost of the intellect? And how do we bring about a balance between the two? Lumpucha, I think it was Lumpucha, one of the forest ajahns, used to say that, Westerners need to learn dana from Asians, and Asians need to learn meditation from Westerners. Uh, it's kind of, in a sense, it's true, but I would say that it's more a modern mindset that tends to favor intellect over emotion, right? Because that's just how we live our lives. I don't think it's a geographical or a cultural problem. Sure, there are some cultures that are more devotional and kind of less reflective. But in general, I think it's this kind of it's the way we lead our life today that somehow we value intellect over emotion. And this then results in a very, very rational, technique oriented approach that can turn into something quite dry, that can turn into something quite arduous. Um, so then this is when we have to kind of cultivate or emphasize certain practices that we can bring in to make our practice soft and moist and comfortable and welcoming and joyful, something that we can really enjoy, the holiday of the heart, like Ajahn Chah used to say. So, aspects like dana, aspects like sila, and we'll talk about these things, dana and sila, in a moment, but these kind of devotional acts. Today is Thanksgiving. The idea of being thankful, the katanyata, katavedita, all of these wonderful things that uplift the mind. Gratitude, huge, huge, huge part of this. So instead of relegating these rituals and ceremonies and even something like chanting, relegating it to second place, relegating it as an unimportant part of the practice, kind of deadens the practice. Now, I'm coming from a very personal place here because, till I actually came to the monastic side of Theravada, I was always in the Vipassana side of things. And in the Vipassana side of things, they try and make it so secular. So there's no Buddha Rupa, there's no image of the Buddha in the meditation hall. There is no chanting. Um, so then it becomes a very, very technique oriented approach that gives wonderful benefits as you're beginning, but immediately you tend to hit a wall, or gradually you tend to hit a wall. And this wall is actually a wall of fear, right? Because the intellect is so emphasized. And again, like I said, this is my experience. Your experience may be completely different. But when there is a very, very technique oriented approach, a very, very intellectual approach, what happens is that we start losing confidence. Is this right? Is that right? Am I doing this properly? Am I not doing this properly? We tend to lose the joy of doing, the joy of being. There is no flow. It's like, instead of a smooth stream, it's like a babbling brook that keeps crashing over stones and rocks. And and that's when we kind of realize that, okay, this is when we are relegating things that can actually soften the heart to second place or as being unimportant. Now, in general, people who come to monasteries don't like chanting too much as a practice, right? And there are good reasons for that. We don't understand the Pali, we don't understand the benefit of chanting. But in reality, what happens is that generally anything ritualistic, anything that's devoted, or anything that is kind of that has a devotional flavor or fragrance, does not appeal to the rational, intellectual side of the mind. So, yes, while I can't understand the Pali, my problem is that I actually cannot perceive or appreciate the intellectual benefit from these devotional acts. But that's not the point of these devotional acts at all. The idea of chanting is not to, unless you reflect on the chant, it's not to give any kind of rational understanding. This act of, say, chanting or bowing down to the Buddha Rupa or any of these rituals that we perform, the idea behind it is to harness beautiful, powerful, beneficial mind states that bring stability and brightness to the practice. Right? And this isn't something, so it takes a bit of a paradigm shift, but it's not something that is totally alien to us. So, one way of looking at it is, why do we feel yucky, uncomfortable, guilty when we behave in ways that are manipulative, when we have emotions like jealousy or anger or envy coming up? And why is it that when we do something good, do something wholesome, why is it that we feel, do anything that's selfless or generous, why do we feel good about ourselves? Right? This is something we tend to miss, or this is something we tend to overlook. Right? Even, and I know this is kind of a broad statement, but I'm gonna make it anyway. Um, Even for a serial killer, the first time he or she committed murder would have been a painful experience, right? For someone who's habitually involved in thievery, habitually involved in fraudulent actions, it is only over time that they get numb to that and it becomes their kind of modus operandi. But to begin with, they would have definitely felt a sense of trepidation, a sense of discomfort, a sense of dis-ease, a sense of fear. And this is important to reflect on, that we naturally, inherently tend to gravitate towards, we are innately, inherently nurtured by goodness, by selfless acts, by virtue. And if we are able to see that aspect that is so natural in us, right, then it's a huge step in this path. So it reminds me of how King Bhumibol Adulyadej, the previous king of Thailand, he was known to be a very he was known to be a model king, a model monarch, and people of Thailand really loved him. He was very devout, supported the sangha. Um, he would practice Buddhism a lot. So in an interview, I think it was a BBC reporter who asked him what he thought was the biggest difference between Christianity and Buddhism. And he said, well, Christianity begins with original sin. Buddhism begins with the idea of original purity, right? We can actually see that. We can actually see that. We can see how we tend to gravitate towards what is good and we tend to shy away from what is bad. Sure, you can say that, hey, all this is intellectual. This is all because of the values I was taught as a child, or this is these are the set of values I've imbibed from my culture. It is my sense of judgment. It is my sense of discrimination between right and wrong. But even at a more basic level, even beyond that, there is an inherent and innate nature to gravitate towards goodness. And it is this innate nature that we try and harness, right? We try and utilize this innate ability. And we'll come to how we utilize this innate ability. But the biggest advantage of doing this, when we see that inherently there's something that I really love about virtue, something that I really love about being good, then what happens is our relationship with what we call defilements, kilesa, changes. Because instead of saying, I am an angry person, our understanding says, no, causes and conditions make anger arise, and then anger passes away. It's like a guest that visits. Sure, that guest is uncomfortable to deal with or handle. It's Thanksgiving, I don't know, maybe a very demanding, belligerent uncle or aunt, or a friend who can be uncomfortable would drop in, but then they leave after the Thanksgiving lunch, right? So this relationship we have with what we view as defilements, instead of hanging on to them, instead of making them part of our persona, this realization that, hey, I am inherently drawn towards goodness. So all of these states that arise and pass away, they just arise and pass away. They are conditioned. They come and they go. They do not define who I am. They do not say that this is Amarasiri. So then, how do we utilize this? Well, we utilize this innate ability by, first of all, recognizing that I am drawn towards goodness, and then directing that by recollecting something good that I've done, something virtuous that I've done. And this kind of conscious reflection, directed reflection, engenders a feeling of wholesomeness, accomplishment, self worth, and a very wholesome pride. And not just that, this then becomes the fuel. This then becomes the cause from which further goodness arises, right? When we recollect, okay, I did that really well and I felt really good, then that becomes the flow of our intention. That becomes the flow of our mind. And very quickly that becomes the flow of our life, right? And this is the link between collectedness and sila, between sila and samadhi, between collectedness and virtue, is that when we are committed to following a set of precepts that we take on voluntarily, right, then that gives rise to a feeling of security, a feeling of confidence, right? And this feeling of security and confidence takes us to wellness, takes us to happiness, takes us to collectedness, takes us to joy and peace. And when we don't have to constantly keep worrying about, is this right or is this wrong? Is this right? Is this wrong? It actually frees up a large part of our chitta to, and gives the chitta the confidence to let go of certain underlying tendencies, to let go of certain defilements that arise from time and time again, kilesas that arise from time and time again. Right? And then we do. So again, coming back to this idea of sila, got to be quite careful that, okay, first of all, and in the suttas, the Buddha always keeps talking of sila parisuddhi. Parisuddhi is a constant cleansing of sila. So what does it mean? Hey, I've taken the precepts. What does it mean to cleanse the precepts? Well, first of all, we've got to guard against a sense of superiority. So I've taken the precepts and I'll say, oh, I'm really good now because I do my precepts very, very well. I keep my precepts really, really well. And then you look at someone, they're useless because they don't keep the precepts. And the Buddha actually, in some of the suttas, says that if someone has pride because of his or her own sila and looks down upon another person because they don't have that sila, that person is the biggest fool. Right? Doesn't mince words there. So when we talk of virtue, when we talk of goodness, when we talk of sila, we have to keep that guarded against arrogance, conceit, a sense of superiority. So that's one aspect of sila parisuddhi. The other aspect of sila parisuddhi is that it must be voluntary. The motivation behind taking on these precepts shouldn't be born of fear, but it should actually be born of a genuine appreciation that, hey, this is the way to live. This is a proper way to live. This is a good way to live. And if I live this way, I see all of these benefits that are accruing. And then these benefits further engender more virtuous action, more good action. And this virtuous action, good action, then makes me feel blameless. There's no remorse, there's comfort, there's joy, there's happiness. And so, this in the precepts itself, the idea of samadhiyami, I volunteer, I take this on, I am committed, I bring this in, I imbibe it. uh, So it becomes part of who I am. So again, it's not just virtue that's important, but virtue must be guarded against a motivation of fear and a kind of arising of a sense of superiority. Right? And then when we actually live that way, then we touch an unsullied mind that is stable, an unsullied mind that is collected, that is firm, that is strong. And so in the suttas, the Buddha actually says, And this is what we call the visankaragatam chittam, a chitta that is free of conditions, that is free of sankharas, that is free of defilements. And so the Buddha says, if you want a preview, if you want a glimpse of nibbana, then touching that unsullied mind, touching that collectedness gives you a little taste of what nibbana is. Right? There's still work to be done, but this work now has a momentum because of that taste. It has a motivation because of that little glimpse, right? And so, again, coming back to that relationship we have with the defilements, that these aren't inherent. I am not a bad person, but these are mind states that come and go. And so, when we look at it this way, then it has tremendous power to move us away from the toxicity of certain mind states, move us away from depressive mind states, move us away from guilt ridden, remorseful mind states, right? And this is what we call right view. And again, right view is something that is not, it's directional in nature, right? And it has two factors supporting it: the external factor and the internal factor. External factor is all these noble, wonderful friendships that we cultivate, that we develop, that we nurture, that constantly keep giving us feedback that is honest, feedback that is kind, feedback that is beneficial, right? And this engenders a feeling of being welcome, a feeling of being accepted. So that's the aspect of Kalyana Mittata, which is an external factor of support. The internal factor of support is when we have all of these sense impressions that keep flowing into our mind through the sense doors. When we see something, hear something, smell, taste, touch, all of these impressions keep flowing into our mind. The ability to just reflect on them, staying in the background without suppression nor expression. This is the internal, this is what is called yoniso manasikara, wise reflection. This ability to filter all of these sense impressions that come into the mind without allowing them to have any power over us, without allowing them to carry us away, yet without suppressing them nor giving them expression. And this is exactly how love for the spiritual life is cultivated, is developed, is engendered, is nurtured. So it is the reflective, curious ability of the mind coupled with the emotional sense of security, well being, brightness, uplift. These two together, balanced, right? Not one above the other. As far as possible, we try and balance them. And then a love for the spiritual life is born. So it's kind of important to keep in mind that one way that this kind of overemphasis on intellect manifests is to have these kind of very rational expectations of progress. I have meditated for an hour and therefore my kilesas must reduce by 3%. Or I have meditated for a year, so I should be able to handle all of these situations like this or like that. I shouldn't get angry. I shouldn't. It doesn't work that way. Having these rational expectations of progress is being far from helpful. It's actually harmful. It's actually detrimental. So, in a sense, we drop We try and drop these rational expectations, and instead of constantly judging and evaluating, we sit back and we enjoy the ride, right? And I just want to, it's 10:45, so I want to give some time for Q&A. Mm. But I just want to leave you with this one thing that His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says, is that the aim of the spiritual life is to try and live with virtue. If we can't live with virtue, at least we try and ensure that we are not being harmful. So a sense of real gentleness that we can bring in. So I leave that for your consideration and open the floor up for questions.
Sadhu, 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 anumodam.
So good to see you, Inga.
So, if there are
I
any
said,
questions
thank
online,
you. I said, thank you so much because I have a question. And how did you know? You remind me.
No, no, no.
I
I
felt
just said
necessary.
hello.
I beg your pardon.
You popped up on my screen, so I said hello. I should go into gallery view so I can see everyone. Uh, anyway, but please go ahead.
May
You
I
had a question.
please?
Yes.
I'm so always grateful to see you, and I'm glad you are well enough to join us.
Thank you.
My pleasure, indeed. My problem, my love, is that I have gone through two Holocausts, so of speak, 95, and I got and my background is, and also in psychology and etc. And I fear that twice now in my life I've had to live and endure and observe psychopathic behavior that is no conscience. And I just wonder, my teacher, how do you deal with psychopaths, i.e., Trump and the rest of the gang, and
Mm.
etc. Hitler, for that matter, Putin, etc. I don't need to make the list longer.
Oh, it's
Thank
a
you.
long list.
Yeah, thank
It's a
you
long
so
list.
much. And
Well, it's always good to hear from you, Inga, and my heart really goes out to you every time when we share these things. Um, I, apart from a kind of removed experience with psychopathic behavior, I've, I- I've had to deal with depressive, self-harming behavior, self-harming tendencies from various people I've lived with. Um, but yes, in a larger framework, how do we put up with the Hitlers and the Donald Trumps of in our lives, both figuratively as well as literally? Well, the first thing is to realize and recognize that because it causes a sense of discomfort within us, right? This is the goodness within us that is speaking. It is the goodness within us that is calling out. Now, very often, what we do is we allow this voice of goodness to turn into a voice of judgment. And we say, I am opposed to this is wrong. And then that gets so magnified and it becomes so compelling that we suffer. Right? So I'm not saying Obviously, I'm not saying we should be accepting a behavior that is obviously morally despicable. But then how do we insulate ourselves? That is the question. So this is where the sense of objectification becomes a helpful tool, very, very helpful tool, to kind of say that now is the time for patience. Now is not the time for reacting. Now is the time for endurance. And that then gives us a little bit of respite, right? It doesn't bring in that heaviness. It doesn't bring in, or rather, it allows us a little bit of an escape from that heaviness. It allows us a little bit of a release from that heaviness. I mean, to take an example, you know, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, right? What he has had to face, thrown out of his homeland, his people are suffering, millions have left, millions have been just exactly like the Holocaust. And yet, he has the ability to say, I don't hate the Chinese. Their behavior is reprehensive. But as a people, they're good. Right? So to look beyond that sense of judgment and to say, you know, this is the time for patience. This is the time for endurance. And at the same time, uplift the heart by recognizing this inherent goodness that lies within us, which actually is made uncomfortable by reprehensible, despicable behavior. It, we, I mean, apart from really insulating ourselves and bringing in ways and means of uplifting, there's not much we can do, unfortunately. So, you know, you always stump me with these questions because I feel so inadequate answering them.
But you always answer very well. I thank you.
Well, it comes from the heart, really. This can't come from the intellect. It just has to come from the heart.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
We do have some questions in person, and
Sure, lovely.
Peter.
Oh, hi, Bante. Thank you for your speech. I
You're
just wanted
welcome.
to further elaborate Inga's question. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on if we how we should approach or apply loving kindness and compassion towards not particularly for the psychopath, but in general, people who do cause pain or suffering from time to time in our lives. How do we apply those Buddhist approach and sort of apply and interpret? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And your name?
Peter.
Hi, Peter. Sorry, I can't see you very clearly. Yes, so the way I kind of look at loving kindness is what I've learned from my teacher, Lumpur Viradhammo, and from Lumpur Sumedo. Now, we have to be practical and pragmatic. If we are faced with a character like Hitler, to say that I'm going to have or cultivate loving kindness to a character like Hitler is being a bit idealistic. Because the reality is that we can't. We hate the guy. We hate the behavior. Now that's I'm not saying whether this is right or wrong, but I'm just saying I'm just referring to the immediate visceral gut reaction that comes up. So then, when you try and cover it over with a layer of loving kindness, it's not lasting and it's not effective. So, what Lumpo Viradammo and Lumpo Sumedo say, and personally I found this immensely helpful, is to actually have loving kindness to that resistance, to that feeling of this is a strong term, but a strong term is warranted, even a feeling of hate, a feeling of hatred, a feeling of ill will, where we say it's okay to feel this way, right? Welcome that feeling, be okay with that feeling, and then see where that opens up, see where that takes you. That is a more genuine, it's a more sincere, it's a more truthful approach, and it's very pragmatic. So, first, we come to terms with the resistance that we feel within. And once we welcome that resistance and allow it to stay, it loses its bite, it loses its sting. And then it allows the heart to open up little by little with understanding and compassion, which then rise up from that openness of heart. So, yeah, that's what that's the way I would that's what I'd say.
Thank you, Bante.
I think there are a few other questions in the back.
Hello, Bante. This is Lynn. How are you?
Hi, Lynn. Good.
I know you
I
can't.
can't see you, but
I know.
I
Excuse
mean,
me. I'll see if I can get a
no,
little
no.
bit closer. There I
Okay.
am. Here I am. See,
Ah,
in the back,
yeah.
all the little people. Just a quick question, actually very
Mm,
similar to what Peter had asked.
mm,
What about sharing merit to all
mm.
of these people? I've done it before, but it doesn't feel right in the heart because I feel
Yes.
like I'm giving one of the highest gifts to somebody who is calculating and their brains are functioning and they're making a choice. So if anything
Yes.
you could say there would be very helpful. Thank you.
Well, again, start with the feeling of resistance. Start with the feeling of discomfort. Welcome that. Make that conscious. Allow that to manifest in awareness. That opens the heart. And then you have compassion, you have understanding, and then you can really share merits. But it's gradual. So, right away to begin with, to say, I'm going to share merit with some kind of reprehensible, some person whose behavior I find reprehensible, is not a honest thing to do. We've got to allow the heart to open first. To allow the heart to open, we've got to really make this resistance conscious. And we've got to welcome that resistance. We've got to say, you're welcome. In fact, Lumpur Sumedo has this technique. He says, take it to the extreme. Just one moment, Brian. I'll come to you. I see Brian's raised his hand. Lumpur Sumedo has this technique of saying, take it to the extreme. So you visualize this person who's very reprehensible, and then think of the worst thing you can do to that person and visualize it and see the effect it has in your chitta. Maybe for a little while it may give you some sense of satisfaction, but very quickly it'll turn into a sense of guilt. It'll turn into a sense of remorse, because we then realize that we are becoming that reprehensible behavior by engaging in an action like this. So start there. Start with welcoming the resistance. Start with welcoming the ill will. Have metta to that. And then eventually it'll take you to a place of empathy or even compassion, and then you can dedicate merits.
Okay, Bante. I know, I appreciate your words about looking within and seeing what's arising. I think that's very important, and I really appreciate that. So I will give that a try, and I'll let you know how it
Yes,
goes.
please. Please. Thank you,
See
Lynn.
if anybody
Yeah,
else.
it's again, it's we shouldn't run away with that judgment. We shouldn't run away with that anger, even though they're very warranted, even though they are, it's actually that is natural reaction. But we pause, we take a look, we welcome it, really feel it. Thank you, Lynn. So, Brian, you had a question? And then Virginia.
A sort of question.
Oh, no, sorry, Brian.
I have
Yes.
hearing aids that resound a sort of question and a sort of comment. The word which I sometimes use when I see events on TV about the terrible situations happening here and there, the word I tend to use is I witness. I don't
Yes.
welcome what's going on. I don't welcome those people who I would define as perhaps, or some would define as evil, but I witness the fact that I have certain feelings. And the witnessing doesn't say I welcome the fact that I can see this terrible thing going on, but I can witness what's going on. I cannot change it. I cannot stop it, but I can
think
perhaps offer some kindness at a very local level to somebody who is experiencing that pain. So the word is witnessing. It has used, and sometimes I find that helpful rather than agreeing that there is terrible stuff.
No. So I think
thank you.
Well,
and
thank you.
Thank you for your comments. They're very helpful.
Thank you, Brian. I think there's a bit of a disconnect. I didn't say we have to welcome the behavior or welcome the person. I'm saying we have to welcome the resistance that comes in within us. And yes, witnessing, absolutely. That's brilliant. That's a wonderful, wonderful word. But I'm saying witnessing is one thing. You have to witness it. But I'm saying welcome the anger that arises within. Welcome the opposition that arises within. So we are not in any way condoning that behavior. We are not in any way agreeing with that person. That behavior is still reprehensible, and that person is responsible for that behavior. But I'm saying what I'm saying is to take responsibility for what arises within me. Because when there is a feeling of ill will that arises within me, it hurts me first. Many times that person is not even aware. They are oblivious, right? So how do I manage this first? And to manage this first is to make it open, is to make it available. So that's what I was saying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Fraser? Yes.
So on the topic.
Yeah. Sorry, you're muted now.
Okay, yeah, I was just pressing to talk. But on the topic of you mentioned the Hitlers and the Trumps of the world. Actually, this last Thursday, I'm not from Canada. I'm from the Chicago area, Illinois. So today isn't even Thanksgiving for me. It's just
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah, mid-October. But last Thursday I actually went to an ICE protest in Chicago. I'm just curious, how does Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist mindset go? Like, how can that be applied towards, say,
peaceful protest against something that is pretty authoritarian and cruel.
I think it stems out of a very noble intention. As long as the motivation and intention are peaceful, as long as the execution of the process and the protest is peaceful, why not? Because Buddhism doesn't teach us to be passive. It doesn't say we accept everything, but it does say we know when to be patient, and we accept even the most difficult thing to it that we can accept. We cultivate the strength to, as Brian said, witness that. We cultivate the strength to welcome that. Right? So if the motivation is one of peace, one of justice, why not? Now, as a monastic, I have certain rules by which I have to live by. So those rules prevent me from doing something like that. But as a private citizen, as someone who has a conscience, without breaking the peace, you do what you do. I applaud that.
Thank you.
And you've got a thumbs up from Inga and
Thank
from
you.
Peter
Yeah, it's
and from
just
Brian. Yeah.
oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead, Tricia.
It's just like seeing all this stuff in like the news and just I don't know, seeing it kind of happen around you is just I try I like doing what I can within my power to like limit it or combat it. I know actually I do follow a couple accounts. There's a daily protest at where I'm at. Not exactly where I'm at, but in my state, Illinois, at Broadview to like from the morning 7 to 9 a.m., but also like 6 p.m. to onwards to just try and like shut down the ice facility that's been opened up because regardless of like politics and everything, like it's just flat out illegal to have like federal troops on state land. Like there was a 2017 amendment prohibiting that. A lot. I don't know. It's just it's a lot of it's really awful.
Absolutely. And really, the first thing we have to do is make sure we are strong. Because there's just so much bad news that keeps bombarding us, right? We are being hit from all directions. And there is such injustice. There is so much suffering. We have to face up to it. So, unless we find ways and means by which we can process it, we can be strong, unless that protest comes from a place of strength and resilience, that protest itself has no meaning. So it becomes our responsibility to be resilient, to be strong, to cultivate that within us. And then from that place, with good intention, with proper motivation, we act. Quite like how you wear the oxygen mask first before helping your neighbor.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Okay. So it's 10. Oh, yes, Marsha, you had a question.
Hi. It
Hi,
wasn't.
good to see you.
It's so good to see you too.
Yeah.
You look so lovely and glowing and happy.
Oh, thank you. So do you.
So was this really an observation when you were talking and
Mm.
everybody's been sharing their ideas and feelings around these difficult times? I think for me, it's finding a way to hold both the beauty and the, excuse me, the opposite. You know,
I suppose on some level the love, and if we use the word hate, and yeah, just personally my finding a way to hold both, because that seems to be what's happening, right?
Exactly. And thank you for saying that, because you really hit the nail on the head. See, this whole kind of intellectual side and emotive side is exactly that. So that's what the Dhamma talk was offering, is that it is the intellect that tells us this isn't good. But then we do have the emotive capacity to see beyond that and look at its opposite, so that both get balanced. And yeah, I think you put it very, very succinctly and very, very well. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Mhm.
Thank you. And I'm conscious of your time, Bhante.
Yes. So
Um,
it's mhm. So it's 10 past 11. So should we do a
the
quick
chant?
chant? Okay.
Yes.
So
So the
this is
chant
the
that we had for those of us is on that have it in person. It's on page 33, and we may not be able to bring it up online, but we will. But Bante will lead it, and we'll those in person will read it from their booklets, and we'll do it in English.
yes, we'll do it in
So
English.
it's the verses of sharing and aspiration.
Yes. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration through the goodness that arises from my practice. May my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless through the goodness that arises from my practice. And through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled. So, just as I was chanting this, Lynn's question and Inga's comments kind of triggered a memory, and I thought I'll leave you with this. So this is a wonderful, wonderful movie. It's a very old film called Fiddler on the Roof, and it's a beautiful, beautiful film, one of my favorite films. Um, and there's this very wise rabbi of the village, and this village is set in Russia way before World War One, and there are these pogroms that are going on, and the Tsar announces policies of rounding up and evacuating Jewish populations. So this is the background. So one of the villagers rushes up to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, Rabbi, do you have a blessing for the Tsar? And the rabbi says, a blessing for the Tsar. May God bless and keep the Tsar far away from us. So I thought that's an apt blessing for all the leaders of the world. So it was wonderful, wonderful spending time with you. Thank you so much, and see you all next time.
So can you join me in just bowing 3 times to Bhante for his presence and for the nourishment of the wonderful talks that we've just received? Please join me.
Sukhi hotu. Sukhi hotu. Sukhi hotu. Hi there, Giselle. I'm just seeing you now. Okay. Have a good Sunday. Happy Thanksgiving.